And we are live on radio in 5,
No.
4, 3.
No
And
way.
we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTK online at the Big1050.com. Here to reflect upon Michigan's victory over Nebraska and preview the Zach Bryant concert. Now, we're actually not going to do that. It's a bye week for Michigan. We'll look around the Big Ten. We'll look around the country. Talk about previewing the weekend's games. But the MGoBlog Roundtable is what it is because of the man who started it all at MGoBlog, our good friend Brian Cook. BC, good morning. How are you?
I'm well.
And then Seth Fisher, his right-hand man. Seth, how are you?
I'm good. I just want to shout out the Detroit Tigers for getting to the end of the season with a chance to get into the playoffs now, and not only get into the playoffs, but do so by ripping the heart out of Cleveland, who thought they were going to have the greatest comeback in history, and then they're just going to turn around tonight and tear it out of their hands. It's going to be glorious. Go Tigers.
Obviously I'm not rooting for the Tigers. I do feel a little badly for them. I mean, I have so many friends who are Tigers fan, and I find myself being very conflicted in these games, even though I am a Cleveland fan, of course. But this has been difficult for me. But that was delusional, Seth. But beyond that, I gotta.
Someone will get a hit against those guys eventually, and then Greg.
I got a email this week from Richard Fader in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and he said, "How scripted is the roundtable?" And I think what Seth just went off on proves that this is not a particularly scripted show. I mean, Stalin and Trotsky, not scripted. When Brian told Sam to hang up on that guy, not scripted. When Izzo called in and Sam trolled him, not scripted.
He trolled me, not the
I don't know. Well, whatever it was. And then Seth just proved this is 100% organic show. It just happens.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have mentioned the Tigers. I'm trying to block it out of my memory, the worst collapse in history. But I can think about happier things, Brian Cook, like Michigan going to Nebraska and shutting them the hell up, because this was going to be an era-defining game for Matt Rule and for Dylan Raiola. And they disrespected us because their coach chose to coach the Oklahoma game. We're going to get them. Well, they got. Brian, what were your takeaways from that game?
Well, I mean, I think the number one takeaway is Greg Crippen, right? Like both of those long touchdown runs are Greg Crippen not only getting one guy, but two guys. And on the second one, he actually picked off a third guy because he, shoved his second level block so far back that the pursuit got caught up in the wash. And, going into the season, Crippen was a question mark. People have been, pretty critical of him, and that includes me. But this was coming. Like, when I did the UFR for the Oklahoma game, I pointed out a couple of scoop blocks that didn't really result in a lot of yards because the rest of the offense wasn't clicking. And, was there against Central Michigan. And here I think we see that Michigan not only can run stretch this year, but is a stretch team. And when you are a stretch team, the most important offensive lineman is your center. So for Crippen to go from question mark to pretty much the cornerstone of a win against Nebraska is a great story. Always love it when a guy who's been kind of iffy pulls the Benny Jopru as a senior and, just takes it to another level. So like he's the star of the game for me. And, the rest of the plaudits go to the defensive line, which turned Dylan Raiola into hamburger meat, which was nice to see after they weren't really getting particularly close to John Mateer. And I don't know if that's because of the mobility of Mateer, or I don't know how much stock I'm buying in that freshman left tackle at Oklahoma, who's a 5-star, but I might be buying a lot of stock in him. So good to see Michigan sort of reassert its dominance in the trenches in a game that, if they don't make a couple of very stupid mistakes, they win by 2 or 3 scores.
Yeah, there was a couple guys who are really on defense who are really kind of stepping forward, and I think Trey Pierce needs to start getting talked about like he is one of the guys, right? It was you go to the season, it's like Rayshon Benny and then 5 other defensive tackles that they're going to rotate with, and Trey Pierce, it wasn't just the 4th and 2 that he stopped on their first drive, it's the play before that he stopped, and then on the next drive he shuts them down as well, and he's not a pass. But we have a lot of guys who can pass rush, especially now that you've added Jayshawn Barham to this defensive line. So that was maybe one of the differences between the Nebraska game and the Oklahoma game is that now you have Barham and Guy, and Guy was slipping around a little bit, but you can see that he knows how to do it. And Demo, who's just, Derek Moore is back. He is a star. He was the best player on the team in this game, and unless Crippen was, they're probably both going to grade out very similar. But he was having one of those games, and we knew those guys. We knew Benny can do it, right? And to have another guy step forward in Pierce, I think Cole Sullivan is starting to step forward and become a star. He still has some coverage issues, so it's kind of like a lot of pluses and more minuses than you want. But if those disappear, my God, that guy's going to be good. And then you just have everybody else is. Yeah, Jaden Sanders, true freshman who's been out there. We saw him in CMU against CMU. He had more snaps than anybody on the defense, and you're like, okay, they're probably trying to get him some snaps. Then he does it again this game. And it's like, oh, he's just a starting cornerback. And when Zeke Berry comes back, now they're going to have 3 cornerbacks that they can trust out there. Which I don't think they can go further than that. Shamari Earls I thought was fine on his one coverage thing, but they only used him in that. And there's a lot of Dotson that you like, and a lot of Dotson that you can. Anyway, young guys coming forward on defense, and that's good to see because it's not just about this year. I think this year is a building block towards a championship run or a championship window the next couple seasons, and I see a lot of the guys are going to be part of that.
It's interesting to me, and perhaps this is why MGoBlog has been such a success. You give Brian and Seth credit. You ask them about a big win against Nebraska, and what's the first thing Brian mentions? The center. And I think that's why a lot of people come to their site to pay attention, to try and learn. I know it's why I do. And and I think Brian undersells himself on this, because after the Oklahoma game, or maybe after the New Mexico game, I questioned Crippen and his performance in at least that game, maybe both games. And Brian said, no, I'm seeing something there. You just have to put Crippen in sort of the right system. And it looks like that's really what's happened. And this leads to a question I've got for you three, and it's, I went to a coaching clinic a number of years ago where a coach said you couldn't run inside zone, outside zone, and power. A team just can't do that. But it seems like Michigan is doing that, even though outside zone seems to be maybe the staple. They're still running some split zone. They ran power at least a couple times in this game. I mean, so you have a thought about that? I mean, Brian in particular, who focuses on offense, I guess.
It's very hard to do all those things. And I do think that you see a lot less duo, you see a lot less inside zone. Well, you still see the gap schemes, right? So, for me, Sharon Moore in a press conference said that they were inside and outside zone were the same play, which I strenuously disagree with.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's a football coach. He's an ex-offensive lineman, so I'm sure he has a perspective. But just for me, like, the ability to run all 3 of those things is very difficult because you want a different sort of player for outside zone than you want for inside zone and duo in particular, right? You want real heavy road graders for one, and you want guys who can really move for the other one. So, the Greg Fry tackles that, Michigan was bringing in under Rodriguez and then briefly again, it's difficult to have guys who can do both. And if you do have guys that can do both, well, then you're really in business. And I do think that they're able to do both against a Nebraska. Now, remember, Nebraska had big struggles against Cincinnati in their opener. They got absolutely paved by the Bearcats and were lucky to escape with a 20-17 win. So I think we might see some narrowing of the playbook, I guess, a little bit against tougher opposition, because I'm not sure Michigan is going to be much of a duo team this year. I just don't know if they have the personnel for that. So, for me, can always run all the things. You can always teach them. Like, even when Michigan wasn't running stretch very much, they had that huge Blake Corum run against Ohio State on stretch because it was a counterpunch. So you can always run something as, like, we don't really do this very often, but because you're not expecting it, it can work. So, but I think running all three of them at a proficiency level where you can be good at all three is very, very difficult. Now, if Michigan's able to pull that off, I'm going to grant Newsom for the Broyles Award, but we'll see.
Yeah, so I think the casualty, if there is one, 4 games in this inside zone. You don't see many split zones. You still see duos in every game. They ran, I think, 4 or 5 duos in this last game, but you just don't see, if you go through, you don't see as much split zone. You don't see as much, open zone. You don't see inside zone in the way that I don't know. I didn't hear Sharon's explanation for calling inside zone and outside zone the same thing, but what we have typically thought of as inside zone, you don't see that as much so far this season. And outside zone, which they needed an element that could get them outside consistently. I don't think that it was just about that. I think Chip comes in and that's a staple of his play menu, but it just also happens to service Michigan's needs. I mean, you had teams that were, twisting and stunting with abandon, and then you pair that with an inexperienced offensive line that at times, hey, they don't know who to get, who's coming around on the twist, how to handle that. Well, if you can run outside zone proficiently, not only can you get to the outside, but it leaves you in position to catch a lot of the movements that teams try to throw on you. So I think that it has just been a great pairing. You happen to have some running backs that look like they're exceptional outside zone runners. Got to be able to one cut, get upfield, and go. These guys are doing that and doing that well. I would like to see if inside zone is going to make an appearance, kind of reappear somewhere down the line. But outside zone, duo, counter, power, that seems to be the mix with outside or with inside zone kind of being put to the wayside a little bit.
Well, you saw like this year they went out and got a Hatar, who is a literally a road grader. He studied that at not Fresno State, Ferris State, and like that's what we thought we needed for this offensive line. But you face a team like Nebraska, and it wasn't just that they got paid by Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a similar kind of offense where they zone blocking, especially outside zone, uses your momentum against you. And Nebraska's defense is all about using that momentum for in order to try to take out multiple gaps with the small guy. So I think that it was actually a really good pairing for what we saw here. And this has been an issue. You go back to the 23 offense, they couldn't figure out what to do against Penn State, right? Until they finally just added enough linemen. Well, most teams would just run zone if they're doing that to you, right? You just run stretch, or you try to get them blocked up and pass the ball over that. But Michigan couldn't do either one of those things. Well, you got a guy like Crippen. Crippen is, we saw him get kind of beat up by Tyleik Williams last year. That happened to a lot of people, but that was what happened when he went against super strong defensive tackles. And then it's something Grant Newsom mentioned as well. They challenged him to get better about that. But he is a smart player. He's always gotten his, he's been here forever. He's gotten his calls right. He went to IMG. He knew, he walked in ahead of most centers and has only gotten better. And he's also quick. So this is a really good use of Crippen. This is a system that works better for him. And then you have Guinera playing right guard, not Hatar, right? You have a young guy, but a smart guy, a center, right? He's going to be the future center for Michigan, and he's able to make those moves. I think Brady Norton, when I scouted him, he was a guy that kind of fits this mold as well. And El Hobby, really, when you recruited him, he was, a light offensive tackle. He was a guy who could play either. So I think that he will fit too if he comes back into this. So, I don't know how everybody is going to fit in the future, but it's they kind of walked into having the line, because of injuries and because of situations and whatnot, and just the teams that they're facing. They walked into the right system for the right line that they have, and it was a perfect fit against Nebraska. I don't know if it's going to be a perfect fit against, Ohio State, right? Who's got a big defensive line. It might not work as well against teams that can just kind of do the same thing that Michigan does to zone, which is just set an edge, say you can't go any further than this. We're going to squeeze you shut, and we're going to 1.5 gap you. And I don't know if it's going to work against teams with that kind of defensive line. It's not like we faced a lot of them.
Craig?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what's being said. I don't know who we're going to play that along the defensive line that's going to pose major issues until you see Ohio State. Now, I haven't looked closely. Have you guys looked at USC at all? I mean, are they good? I mean, is that a team that's
better? But now it's against Michigan State, so
yeah.
Their defensive line doesn't matter because everyone's just throwing against them.
Yeah. I mean, they look good on offense for sure, but I'm not sure defensively they're even going to pose a challenge. I mean, right now, I felt coming into the year the big issue would be the offensive line, and right now I'm not really thinking that so much. And I'm more than that. I think in the future, I mean, you got a lot of young guys here.
right.
You've got, I mean, the next 2 years, the offensive line should be just fine, thanks. And you pair that with, I'm not, I think Seth or Brian said that the Washington running back was better than number 22. I'm not so sure. I mean, he's the best. I mean, when you add in everything, his speed, his ability to break tackles, his vision on at the line of scrimmage, and his pass pro, which was pretty good this week. I don't know that there's anyone better than that kid right now. And so to me, aside from this year, the future's looking pretty damn good for Michigan. I think somebody said 2027. I didn't know, next year, if not this year. So.
So Brian, here's the thing that when I look at Chip Lindsey, can you accentuate your positives, sort of maximize what your guys can do right now while sort of masking the deficiencies, or at least coaching up the ones that you can make them proficient in? And I think that he is doing that really well. He's doing that really well with Bryce, with his usage plan for him, injecting him in the running game. You see a lot of pocket movement. You see nakeds, him throwing on the move, kind of limit the drop backs. That helps the offensive line. Inserting implementing outside zone for this line. I mean, this is a guy that really seems to be in his bag when it comes to, hey, this is what this group can do right now. Let's sort of tweak and rig out everything they can do right now, and then we'll figure some things out. We'll grow the rest along the way. I think he's doing a splendid job of that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of half field reads for Bryce, a lot of rollouts where he's very proficient and the pass protection isn't being tested. Now, I think they've done a pretty good job in pass protection overall, but if you don't have to risk it, why risk it? The one thing I'd say is that you're seeing teams begin to jump screens a lot, like Oklahoma was jumping screens a lot, Nebraska jumped a couple in this game, and they haven't really punished that. I'm sure that's coming. But you see a lot of unusual things that Michigan wouldn't have done a couple of years ago, like motioning out Max Bredesen, which is, I mean, that's an alert for a defense because Max Bredesen versus a cornerback is game over. So that's something that you really have to account for. There's they got a couple times in this game. There was that first down play action that got sacked where they were trying to pull a guard and it was just never going to happen. But overall, like, you have that screen to Haynes against that zero blitz, and that really kicks off Michigan's like killed the game drive. And there was another screen where, you know, Sprague wasn't quite aware of what the situation was. That was a touchdown. If Sprague blocks that guy, because again, Nebraska sent guys across the line of scrimmage. Like, man, he won this matchup big time. And like, I liked what I saw from him in pretty much every game against Oklahoma when Biff Poggi was like, we took the air out of the ball. And I'm like, let this man cook. I like what I'm seeing. It's you get the modern kind of spread principles, but they're not going away from what makes Michigan. Like, I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen from him so far.
Yeah, that motioning Sprague out made that play. Made that. I mean, motioning Bredesen out.
That was something from the Rose Bowl, actually, if you remember.
I've got a question, Brian, about the play where 53 is pulling and then in pass pro. I mean, Underwood got sacked on this play.
Yeah.
With, you know, is that a plausible, you know?
No, you can't make that block if they're going to run that defense. So that's you just got right.
Okay.
So if they're going to be that aggressive off that edge, then your play action, because they're not respecting the run, right? At that point, like that guy flying so hard into the backfield, if it's a run play, he's just gone. So what you're relying on with that first down play action is that they're actually going to respect it. If they don't, that's the kind of thing that happens. And, you know, that's an RPS minus in my book, rock, paper, scissors, you know, and then there are tons of pluses to offset this, many of them which didn't actually result in big plays because of player errors. But just in terms of what I saw in terms of, does this play call make sense against this defense? More often than not, I think Lindsey was dialed in. I thought, you know, he had a great game.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Samaj, if he throws that touchdown, I mean, there's using the tendency to your advantage, yeah, because you're flicking it out to him on a bubble or a hitch, and teams are reacting to that. Man, you got to do wide open in the end zone. That's some points you leave on the field. And then you had the one toward the end where Sprague and Haynes go for the same guy. This is a touchdown for Bryce. If 22, if Haynes blocks the right guy, that's another touchdown. I mean, you just saw really good calls all throughout. I thought he was doing a great job of game in the other side. And so, and I keep coming back to how he's growing up his young quarterback, how he's growing up this offense. That's what you want to see. And going into the bye week, I think you had to be really happy with where you were if you're Michigan.
Yeah, it was a Terrell Pryor offense, right? Like get him outside, get him, you know, use his legs to kind of scare them a little bit.
Well,
don't put too much on his plate.
Terrell Pryor like ran for 800 or 900 yards as a freshman, so I wouldn't quite put it in that box. Like, I do think that I'd like to see a little bit more QB run where you're testing that defensive end on the backside. We haven't seen Bryce pull except maybe once or twice. And he made a mistake pulling, but I think that's something that you just got to do on occasion. You got to take that chance, because if they're leaning to that back, your run game is going to be cut down. And I'm willing to take like a 3 or 4 yard run from Underwood every once in a while just to keep them honest.
Yeah, I mean, with Nebraska, they're built to stop that kind of. Right?
Well, there were a couple opportunities
out there. Yeah,
there were a couple opportunities where like the backside end really turned his hips, and once that guy turns his hips, you should pull. Like, and they were scraping sometimes, but there were a couple opportunities where it was like, okay, this one probably needed to be a pull, and that's something that I think Underwood will grow into as well. Like, and I think he might be a little reticent because, you know, the one time he did pull earlier in the year was a tackle for loss against Central, so it's probably a little hesitant right now. But I do feel like there's more to come, and like they don't want him sitting in the pocket just yet. But once you can have that happen, where you can actually just have him sit back there and read a defense, that guy gets very difficult to defend. Because you saw on that, you know, touchdown on the quarterback draw, I mean, nobody was catching him. Like Haynes is faster than him, but barely. There's some account out there that, like, you know, gets the fastest moments in college football on a weekend, and both Haynes and Underwood were on it this week. So this is not like a regular quarterback who's running the ball. This is a real threat to take it the distance whenever he does.
There was a quote. This is back when we were doing draft again, which was a thing where we used to draft Big Ten players in the preseason. And there was a Maryland quarterback who I remember an interview that he gave where he said he was afraid to pull until his coach started pointing out how much faster he was than the guy who he was going against. Because when you're in that situation, you see a player kind of looking at you, and you have to realize at that point you're basically in a little, you're in a basketball game. You're the point guard, and you're seeing, can I get around this guy? It's just an athlete versus athlete kind of situation. And he was saying at this point, like, he had to kind of just gauge what his speed was relative to somebody else. And that's where he had to start making his decisions instead of he'd been coached up until that point. Where is the player? Right. And instead it's like, dude, just play basketball. So I think it's a feel thing. And I think with there's so much on Bryce. He's a freshman. He did plenty of it in high school, but that's against high school players, right? You have to get that calibrated before you can do it well.
Well, I liked he had the one drop back, and I guess there's some question because I guess Devin said you can't throw that; it'll get picked off. And another guy, I didn't see that. Is what people are telling me. And that's the whole shot he threw. And I don't. I have to ask the guys.
The one that was barely out of bounds for.
Yeah, the one that the field judge called the completion. I don't know if you guys. He was like,
his foot went down the line. I would call that I would call that out.
And the field judge said it was complete. The line judge from way back runs up from behind and says incomplete. And then they go to the booth and they don't say confirmed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They say upheld. So if you had gone with the field judge, it would have been a completion. That's how close it was. That's kind of beside the point. He gets cover one across the board, and he wants his matchup. Now, hey, I guess because you had a safety that was cheating to that side, maybe that's what Devin's rationale for saying you can't throw that ball, it'll get picked off in the future. But he holds the safety. You see it, like if you watch the All-22, you can see he is cognizant. He is aware of where the safety is. He is holding the safety on the hash or a little to the side of the hash. He's holding them there, and he's going to hit his matchup. And even if the safety gets over, he threw it to his back shoulder, high to the outside where safety wasn't going to get it. I thought it was a well-placed ball. I thought he knew what he had, and I thought he delivered it where you got to deliver it to your guy. If, my guy against your guy, my man against your man, I'll bet on my guy. I think that's what he did. I wouldn't have any problem with that if I'm his coach.
Well, especially where he put the ball.
It was perfect.
Like McCauley's 6'5" with ups, and he had to get up to get that ball. Like nobody else is touching that ball, even if there's great coverage. Like if that is like hip to hip, McCauley is still the only guy with a shot at that ball. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I thought it was a great throw. Incidentally, on the quarterback draw that went for a touchdown, they caught Nebraska in a stunt, and later on the long run by Haynes, they caught Nebraska in a stunt, and Nebraska wasn't stunning that often. But when they did, they sure made them pay.
Well, in the first half, they were stunning near constantly. Like, actually, Sam stole my thunder on this because he just posted about this yesterday. But the outside zone, like
mitigated it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's very easy to like get out of position on outside zone when you're stunting. So on the first one, Crippen, helps out Afobe, but he didn't actually have to do that much in that regard. But the good part about that block is he has the awareness to be like, okay, now I'm done and I can go climb to the linebacker. But that play saw both of those defensive tackles loop outside and they were just gone. So that's why that hole was so big. Yeah. So Michigan kind of beat them out of that in the first half, and they had to go to playing it more straight up, and they're just not good at that. And that's why you saw like those power runs, that counter stuff where they couldn't fool Michigan with what they were doing pre-snap because they couldn't fool Michigan with all the games and stunts because they were worried that they were going to get another outside zone on their face, which they proceeded to do.
Right.
They did it in 2nd and 10 late too, because Nebraska was using that. They're trying to they were like, okay, maybe we can stunt on passing downs, and then Michigan's like, nope, you can't do it then either. So.
Yep. We need to get to a break. But if you want an example of what happens to you when you can't block that stuff, keep going back to the Indiana game because I sat there feeling like, wow, I've never seen the team do this the whole game. And Indiana did it the whole game, and Michigan just had no answer for it. Well, you do that against Michigan at your own risk now. And it was definitely not worth the squeeze for Nebraska. Not that they have a much better alternative by trying to play Michigan straight up. We got to get to a break, though. Back with more MGoBlog Roundtable on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTK, online at thebig1050.com.
Clear on the radio.
Yeah, I neck sharpied it too. And there was one play I think when Nebraska was just like, okay, fine, we'll play you straight up, and Michigan runs counter and it gets 6 yards so nonchalantly, and it's like, well, you can't do that either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little like both tackles had moments of poor awareness in this game or just not knowing what the assignment was, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Mm-hmm.
But relative, I mean, these are the backup guards, and I saw like maybe 2 mistakes from Guarnera and like maybe 2 or 3 from Afobe. But Link had a couple of like, what do you do in moments? Like there was a quarterback pin and pull where he like pulls and there's a guy like shaded inside of him, and I'm like, what are we doing?
So that brings about a question that we can ask right now. So let's say Gio is healthy coming out of the bye. He's your left guard for sure. Between Guarnera, Afobe, Norton, who's your right guard?
I think Guarnera is he works really well with Crippen. He's made very few mistakes. He's seemed up for it physically. Like I think he might have won the job. And I thought Norton was a pretty okay, but the last 2 weeks I've been very impressed by him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's where it goes when El-Hadi comes back, until he screws up and they want to try someone else. But I would say right now it looks like Guarnera right guard. Next year I assume he'll be the center. My assumption is, and then they'll be,
and the next year, next year.
Right. Well, next year it looks like they have options.
Yeah.
Like next year it looks like they're going to be deep and still young.
Right. Because they'll have Babalola back. They'll have Haywood.
Frazier should be like 300.
Yeah. I mean, they'll have the guards they've got now. I mean, they're going to have, they'll look like the defensive lines, where you got 8, 9, 10 deep.
I think that's 27. If things go well, they should have a lot of depth.
Yeah.
Can El-Hadi play left tackle?
I mean, like Link has improved a great deal. I just
if you're gonna be a stretch offense, though, man, like you could maybe get away with a guard at that.
Well,
position.
if you're gonna be a stretch offense, then I think Blake Frazier becomes a lot more viable. Mm-hmm. Even if he's light and he's not going to pound people, he's very agile. So,
but they still want to be able to. They still want to power counter.
Yeah.
Now, if teams start to adjust,
which they will.
Will the hammer come back out? Are they capable of pulling the hammer out? It would be the question.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was. Sorry, go ahead.
Frazier is like 20 pounds lighter than I think Crippen, which is like, okay, you need another year to bake there, kid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we were trying to tell you, Sam, in the offseason. You're like, hey, Blake Frazier's happening, guys. And we're like,
I mean, I was looking at the things that we're talking about now. He's definitely better in pass pro. Mm-hmm. But Link is so much more physical in the run game. So what do you want? 6 1/2 dozen the other. They're favoring the guy who is definitely the better of the two run blocking wise, and they feel like he's made enough progress in pass pro to be like, okay, we can live with that.
I just want to point out though, we have, we were asking about like who's coming up on the schedule. Nebraska's really small. We've also played a couple other teams that have been really small on the defensive line. And Wisconsin's actually pretty big on the defensive line. They got Daryl Peterson is 260. They got that Louisville transfer, whose name escaping me right now, who's
30
kind of
seconds,
like,
guys.
But yeah, then they've got a 330-pound nose. Like, they're going to be the kind of team that maybe you can stretch them. Maybe they're too slow, but they're not going to be playing the same way that these teams are playing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. They have a real good run defense, but I watched that Maryland game. They were awful. Awful.
Yeah.
They were.
Well, Billy Edwards will be back, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think that's
mean,
clear
maybe.
at all.
They tried to play him, but they played him
Yeah,
like
but
good for one drive, and then he couldn't do it.
Coming
they
back,
gotta
guys.
buy.
Stand by.
So.
And we're back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the big1050.com. Before you get back to the MGoBlog Roundtable, I want to tell those of you who are do-it-yourselfers a one-stop shop for all of your home improvement needs. Our friends at Chelsea Lumber. They have 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. Find them online at chelsealumber.com. When you do, you'll find great products sold by great people at great prices. And they offer great service because Chelsea Lumber is where the home begins. So everything from lumber, which they are your lumber experts, lumber headquarters. You want quality, you want the best premium lumber around. They are the source, but not just lumber, roofing, windows, doors, floors, tools, work clothes, boots, everything in between. You can find all of everything that you need over at Chelsea Lumber with 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. Find them online at chelsealumber.com. So, fellas, kind of spanning, I do want to give a little more mention really quickly to the defense. I mean, 7 sacks, fellas. A lot of positives that we can talk about in terms of things that you would want to see them brush up on during the bye week window. Seth, what would those say? If you look at them on film, you looked at them in the Wisconsin game. What did you say? Oh man, they need to address that.
You got to talk to Wink. It's there were 2 obvious ones. When they had Brandon Hillman down, and Hillman, that's some coaching points, but also you got to know whether your player can do that or not, and that was really bad. And when the Michigan fans can see it ahead of time, it's too much. The Hail Mary, he tried to do the same thing that he'd done earlier in that drive, where I think we saw this against like USC last year, and they got it one time. They got a sack off of this, where he has the linebacker blitz and hit the guy who's blocking the defensive end, and then the defensive end can come inside. But he's doing it on the opposite side from where the quarterback's going to roll out. So all you're doing is freeing Derek Moore, who's winning that block 90% of the time anyway. And you just wasted a linebacker, and you're wasting another linebacker playing spy. It's like, what are we doing? It was, I use an XKCD comic to explain, like, this is, you're not even in the same reality when you're calling this play. And it's just this sense, and there were a lot of little plays. There were a ton of, we talk about rock, paper, scissors. There are a ton of rock, paper, scissors -1s where it's just too easy right now to do the thing that everyone does against this kind of defense, which is put 2 tight ends out and spread them out 5 wide. And he wants to stay in his 5. He wants to keep his 5-man front. He wants to keep his 5-2 look. He wants to bring 5. He wants to bring a fire blitz. And I mean, you see this all the way up into the NFL. This is how you defeat that defense. And it's just like, dude, we solved this problem already. Minter and McDonald both came and saw the same issues. McDonald had a lot of the same problems that Wink did in the first few weeks, but then he fixed it. He realized what you can do in college and what you can't. And I think Wink last year, his players talked to him, said, you got too much on our plates. You're asking us to do too many things, and it's not working. And they took a lot of the playbook out, and they were really good. They were maybe better than any of his predecessors were for 4 games last year. And now we've regressed back to where we were at the beginning of last year. And when I'm charting it, I'm just like, okay, here we go again. Like, this is exactly like Texas last year, or exactly like USC last year, where it's just, I don't want to have plays where the defensive coordinator is trying to outsmart the other team. That's not how you play college football. You can do it sometimes, right? You can be in your bag a little bit, but that should not be the game plan. And when it is, we get these huge numbers in the rock, paper, scissors score that shouldn't exist. You should not have a lot of the game taking place in that aspect of the game. It shouldn't be a coordinator versus coordinator game in college, especially when you got better players. And when he just let the players play, Derek Moore was destroying those tackles, right? TJ Guy was getting around. Jayshawn Barham was completely unblockable. Rush 4, play your quarter, half. I know it's not going to make you look smart, but it's going to make your players look good, and that's how we have to play defense here.
I think if you see them prove that they can consistently win like they were winning in this game, then I think that you will see them play to that and cater to that. I was a lot more critical of, being overly aggressive last year when you had Mason and KG and Derek Moore and Josiah. I was more critical then than I am now, where I think, you know what, the aggression is well placed with this group, even if you do have some guys who are proficient, who are guys you got to say, hey, we got to account for him. But to this point, the only guy that I was really looking at to have proven it this year was Jayshawn. But then you saw in this game, okay, Rayshawn, you back? Demo, you back? If they can do that consistently, then yeah, I think you'll see him dial it back some.
Well, so the thing is that by the time he goes to that not cover 0 but Oki front where he's trying to drop Hillman, they had already established that this offensive line could not block a 4-man rush from Michigan. And I just feel like if that's the case and you're playing a new safety and you're playing in there's a bunch of college players, the risk reward is just off. And so it kind of feels like he's still in that NFL mindset because he was in the NFL for a million billion years, right? So if you're asking a NFL safety to do that who's 28, fine, he knows exactly what he's doing. Brandon Hillman isn't in the right technique. Brandon Hillman is backpedaling like he's at a deep safety position. So if you can't teach it, you can't call it. And I don't think they can teach everything that Wink wants to run, because young players are going to make mistakes like Hillman made. And that's not on Hillman. I mean, on one level, okay, it's on Hillman, but you're asking him to do something that he's obviously not comfortable doing. So for me, simplifying the offense, the defense is something that you just have to do, especially early in a year. And given the context of what was going on in that game, that play call was way too cute. And that's something that we saw last year against Texas. I think it is a thing that is going to be a problem, because when things get tense, you revert to who you have been, and it's hard to maintain sort of a level of I'm going to turn over a new leaf when you're nervous and it's very stressful. So I'm kind of with Seth on this. I'm not quite as strident on this topic as he is, but I don't chart.
I mean, I wasn't strident until I looked at this game, because I was looking at the Brandon Hillman thing before.
Okay, but
then there's 14 more times where he's wasting a player on a play. Where there's 14 RPS -1s in this game.
Okay,
and that was where I was like, that's alarm bells.
I mean, for me, yeah, and I think the Hail Mary is another good example of it. Is you're dropping a defensive end into the end zone. It's what is the purpose of that? Why don't if that's Donovan McCulley, is that pass complete? I don't think it is.
I think it is either.
So what's the I don't understand the value of that quote unquote deception right there. It just feels like sometimes he calls cute things so that he feels that he did something that beat the other guy, and it's a little, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's always sensible what he's doing.
Yeah, right. That one was no timeout. TJ Guy on the in pass coverage, running back in the end zone. Yeah, that's definitely you put that on the coaches. I don't put that on the players.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it was we're talking about the play design of that play, but what are they practicing instead of getting that play right? Right? Those are the kind of things you would figure out, because if you run that in practice a few times, you're going to notice that TJ Guy's going to notice. He's going to be like, hey, why am I here? There's nobody containing, and why am I standing right here? Because I'm not going to do anything right here. I'm a defensive end.
So I think as we talk about the rest of the Big Ten real quick, I think that where they are now, especially the returning guys, they could take some license here like they did last year. That was a big part of how and why they sort of changed the approach or modified the approach. The players took some license here and said, hey, you know what? We feel like this isn't working, that we could do this better. And then at the same time, there are some things that from a coaching perspective, they were like, yeah, but you guys aren't doing this right. And it was kind of a melding. Well, Derek Moore was one of the most vocal guys last year, and he called his teammates out, but he called the coaches out too. And so that was a big deal. Same thing with Rob Moore. So I think with what these guys, kind of the credibility that they built up, and then if you go out and you ball, I think you can take some license to be able to step up and say, hey, you know what? I think we need to do something a little different. So let's see how they come out of it.
There's that. A lot of these minuses were just, you're leaving Cole Sullivan in positions that he shouldn't be in. And that's a guy that you want to be able to access. I want to see more of Cole Sullivan on the field, but I don't want to see Cole Sullivan having to play safety. I don't want to see him having to play nickel. I want to see him playing linebacker. And if you could just shift the window, right? It doesn't have to, you don't have to get rid of everything cute, but shift the window to just doing more of your base stuff, because you have better players on the field, especially when you got Cole Sullivan, who's just a freak athlete. That interception he had, it was incredible, right? It's bouncing off of Jair Hill's chest, and he reaches his arm out, and his hand shouldn't even be able to touch that ball, and somehow he brings that thing in. And that kind of coordination, you see it with him, the explosion he has, but he's a young player, and he's going to mess up things if you put too much on his plate. And I think that they're playing Rolder twice as much, because Rolder's a senior. He's been in the defense. He knows how to shift around. Rolder can play Mike as well as Will and everything. I understand that. But if you are designing your defense, and you got Jaden Sanders, a true freshman out there, right? If you're rotating through safeties, now they're going to have Rob Moore back, but you have Brandon Hillman, who kind of, who needs some coaching. You have these young players who have tons of talent, and you can't access that talent because they're, questioning what they're doing, or they're backpedaling when they're not supposed to be where they're supposed to. Like, that kind of thing, just that's not how you can coach this defense. You got to coach the players you got. So it's not just Rod Moore needs to go to Winkman and say, hey man, we can do this and we can't do that. It's got to be some of the young players and saying, I need something that I can do so I can feel comfortable in this defense, because I'm not an NFL player yet. I'm a sophomore.
Yeah, young players not going to be able to do that, but the older players can have, and I think if
I
they
just don't think it's a great situation when you had this conversation last year, and then your defense got a lot better, and now you have to go back and have the conversation again, right? That's not a great situation. But like, I do think that the overall scheme is okay. Like, I think it's good. I think it's confusing, and I think that they're getting after it. But you just gotta cut down on the, like, look at me, I'm a very special boy calls. Like, come on.
All right, so real quick, we got 3 minutes, and so looking across the Big Ten, couple of big, you got a big matchup with Ohio State going out to Washington, and then of course Oregon coming over to Ohio State. So let's start off with the teams that Michigan's going to play. The Ohio State-Washington game. How do you guys see that one?
I think it's going to be interesting. Like, this is a Washington offense that has real skill players. Like, Boston at wide receiver is awesome. Damon Williams is a true dual threat, and Coleman at running back is legit. I'm not sold on the Washington defense at all, but I'm not sure I'm sold on the Ohio State offense that much. They got outgained very badly by Texas, despite Arch Manning being Arch Manning. And that the shine of that win has really gone down the tubes when it's like, okay, yeah. Also, UT San Antonio did that to Arch Manning. So I'm interested to see whether this game is competitive. I think it will be, and I think Washington actually has a decent shot.
Yeah, Washington they're interesting because they're anti-Michigan in a lot of ways. They have an amazing secondary. They have some really good young small edge rushers, and they've got a lot of skill position players. But their lines are kind of the question, right? So I think that Ohio State. I wish this wasn't true, but I feel like Ohio State wins these games where they just they rely on their offensive line. They go back to the lizard brain and they just kind of let themselves play ball. And they have a problem with Michigan because Michigan's just kind of so stuck in their heads. But when they get into these games, they seem to identify the weakness and attack it. And I do see that Washington has weaknesses. You're right, Jonah Coleman, he's 5'9", 240, I think. Like the guy's built so cool. He's just a cool running back. And I think Boston, you saw him last year. The one thing is everyone struggles when they go out to Washington. It's a slippery field. It's a weird place to play. Those fans really do get up. So I don't know, man. Taking a team from the Midwest and taking them to the West Coast, weird things happen.
I agree.
I need you to chime in on Ohio, on Penn State, Oregon. Is James Franklin not James Franklin this one away this week?
No. Oregon wins this game, and James Franklin will do stupid stuff. I mean, that's like axiomatic. That's like, the sun rising in the east. And so that's what's going to happen there. What interests me about the Big Ten right now is I could see up to 6 teams going 10-2. And what happens then, I have no idea. So
that was my preseason. Yeah. That was my preseason guess.
Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of teams at 10-2.
Yeah.
Well, folks, that is going to do it for us on this edition of the MGoBlog Roundtable of the Michigan Insider. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Lions beat the Browns. Craig Ross.
Hey, I'll be happy with that. I hate the Browns. As long as that guy owns them, and I become a Lions fan, so I hope they beat the brakes off the Browns.
All right.
I'm not saying the same thing about the Tigers tonight.
Tigers are coming back.
We'll see the rest of you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.